Well, hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Rudd. I'm President and CEO of the Asia Society in New York. Welcome to our series of conversations with Asian Americans building America, or ABBA for short. I think there was a music group called ABBA, but then again, I'm old enough to remember it. Most of you are not. We're talking with a vast range of people from across the country, all of whom have made remarkable contributions to this extraordinary country. And today we're joined by co-hosts Diane Yoo and Shveta Pillai, who are co-founders and co-hosts of Identity Unveiled, a media platform that amplifies the powerful collective voice of Asian Americans, female leaders and pioneers. And they join us from Houston. So greetings to both of you. Thank you for being on our program.
Thank you for having us.
That's good. Diane, let me start with you. Tell us about Identity Unveiled and why did you co-found the platform with Shveta? And can you tell us a little bit about your podcast, what you're hoping to achieve through it?
Absolutely. Shveta and I met through a leadership group here in Houston, Texas. And through that, we actually connected on our experiences growing up as Asian American women. And we really are passionate about getting more of the Asian American woman voices out there, specifically trailblazing women who have achieved incredible firsts, groundbreaking barriers. We need to get their stories out there, and we hope that IU is a platform for that.
That's fantastic. Now, Shveta, tell me a little bit about your personal story. You're second generation Indian American, native Texan. Diane, second generation Korean American. Tell me each about your stories and where the families come from, how you got to America, and all the things you've done since.
Sure. So, born and brought up in Houston, Texas, and I've lived all my life in Texas, not worked all my life in Texas, but certainly lived all my life in Texas. My parents came here. My dad came here first. He was doing his PhD in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, in the 60s. And then he went and got married and brought my mother over, moved to Texas in the mid 70s. And, my family is, it's interesting. There's like kind of two cultural dynamics that are at play. I come from one side of my family has women that have really been trailblazers in themselves. On one side of my family, I have 3 aunts, 2 were doctors, 1 were lawyers. My grandmother was a freedom fighter during the partition with British, and really fierce women. I come from a background of very fierce women. And then, there's the other side of my family where probably more the traditional sense of taking care of your family, and career is always important. And I think, education was always important, of course. And while you wanted a good job, you still had to take care of family first. And so going back to that point about education, I think growing up in Texas, there was always this push towards doing well in your studies. And I think every Indian person or Asian person probably relate to that your parents wanted to make sure that you were, very successful academically, got into a good school and got a good job and then got married. So there was always that expectation to do
no pressure.
Yeah, it's funny because you grow up in that space and you don't really think of it as pressure. It was just, that was what was expected. That was what was known. In fact, I didn't even know that people didn't go to college because I was surrounded by a community primarily of Indian people, and that's what was expected. So I grew up, of course, in Houston, and there was kind of always that, you kind of knew you were different, right? Growing up in Texas, there was always that feeling of that you were different, and you'd be called like Gandhi or a dot head growing up, and you felt.
Oh, really? I've never heard that one before.
No?
Dot head. Really? Gee,
well, I got that also when I was working. It was.
That's gross.
It is, and so anyway, I went to University of Tech, graduated, and went to University of Texas at Austin. For both my graduate and my undergraduate. My career has really been taken through different career cycles. I've worked in real estate, I've worked in insurance, I've been working in consulting in a large professional services company. And really kind of all throughout that time, there was always this push to kind of be become an executive or a leader of an organization. I think for my parents at one point, for my dad, one day, he was like, he wanted me to be like the Serena Williams, right? He wanted me to really pursue tennis. And if that wasn't going to happen, then one day, hopefully I'd be the leader of an organization and be the next CEO. So there was always really this push to—
No pressure.
no pressure. No pressure. And I think that's where Diane and I and our stories were really kind of came together, because she and I really grew up always wanting to be at the top of our game. But for us, we didn't have anybody that really looked like us, that we could relate to. It was really, our mentors or the people that we modeled ourselves were not Indian or Korean. I mean, our parents were great role models, of course, but when it came to the workplace, there was always this uncertainty around how to be, where the dynamics between growing up in an Indian culture and growing up with a Korean culture, or growing up with growing up in America was a different kind of like a paradox sometimes. So I've got a sister, I've got 2 kids, I'm married now,
what an extraordinary journey. I'm going to be forever haunted by you being called Dothead, but I'm going to stick that in the back of my mind for the future. What a horrific thing to go through. Diane, second generation Korean American. You're a native Texan. Tell us about your story and your family story.
Absolutely. So I actually am from Texas. I just moved to New York. I became a partner at a firm here in venture capital. It's a $100 million firm. We're really excited to make an impact and inspire more diverse investors. So my background, my parents were immigrants. They worked 5 jobs. I remember my mother telling me she ate more donuts than she made donuts at our local donut shop, and flipped a lot of burgers at Jack in the Box. And my father was your brown bagger at the grocery store, right? He was a guy.
Yeah, I've done both those jobs. I've been both a brown bagger and I've flipped burgers, but I've never made donuts. So there you go.
And yeah, to this day, she credits those donuts for those 15 extra pounds. But I grew up with a very amazing, loving, a family full of leaders and a family full of laughter. We really didn't have much growing up. I juggled so many jobs. We lived in a 1-bedroom with no furniture, or newspaper was our furniture, and we sat on that. There were days our pastel pink Cadillac didn't want to turn on. And I remember having pictures in sweltering hot, Texas heat. But that was my childhood in Texas, right? But I remember that my father came from a family of giants in terms of entrepreneurs and a can-do mentality. And growing up with such an entrepreneurial father put such an imprint on my life. And at a young age, I learned about entrepreneurship. I saw unwavering grit and perseverance and landslide of losses. And yet my father just got up the next day and I said, "Dad, are you okay? It's just another day." And that is the type of DNA that I grew up with. And I grew up with all brothers. So I'm the middle daughter. And because of that, I was always being coached in sports. I was on the tennis team, although I never made the school team. I was on the country club team. And I was actually a very good street basketball player because I liked to foul my brothers. I was more familiar to aggressive contact sport playing than playing with Barbies or women. And because of the mentality of my brothers, making me go a little bit harder. And, I was actually quarterback in college for our IM football team. And my spiral was a little bit more intimidating than most men's performance. So it was a fun time growing up with all brothers, an incredible father figure of entrepreneur, giving us, what an example of entrepreneurial spirit is. So from there, I started building my career. I was actually in the beauty and fashion industry. I was playing street basketball, and that 5'8" turned into modeling. And so I was scouted like a black hole. And from there, went into runway and went into print. And next thing you know, Diane, your picture's in China. And I saw it on this product, and I saw it on TV. And from there was continue to get scouted. But the entrepreneur in me and that little competitive spirit that I had was born into this family with, said, I'm not going to stop here, and I'm going to outdo my competitors and rise to the top. From there, I was scouted, and I taught myself everything: stage presence. How do you win people over? When you're a model in front of thousands of people, how do you take over the stage? From there, I was scouted into pageants, and I competed like an Olympian, not there to make friends, but there to win. And then went into pageant after pageant and continue to travel the world, winning Miss Korea, started from Miss Texas, even further down to Miss Junior Teen, all the way up to Miss Korea Universe, and then was a consultant at Miss Universe, and said, you know what? I am 26, I'm aged out, can you believe it, in this beauty industry? I'm gonna go for my last one, and I won Miss Asia. But prior to that, as an entrepreneur, I said, I'm gonna run my own pageant organization as well, and wrote a small book, scouted, coached, and turned girls into women with all the wonderful traits that I was able to learn through that. And now today, through that, I have continued to create businesses and went into fashion after that and worked the fashion corporate ladder, and actually started my fashion tech company and landed at the largest pitch competition in the world, where you competed over 400 people. We made it to the qualifiers. And then from there, I got my Rice MBA, and then went into the finance world of investing. And from there, have started numerous funds. To today, have now started 15 venture funds.
Well, that's a pretty interesting career trajectory. That's what happens if you play basketball and don't do Barbies. I'm quite impressed by that. By the way, as a father, I denied our daughter access to Barbies. And I was seen as a very mean-spirited father for doing so, but I don't really regret it. Tell me, both of you, in your own words, a few quick reflections on what needs to happen to have more Asian American women advancing through the C-suites of America. Back to you, Shveta. Tell us about you and your views on that.
So it's a great question. And I think first is really looking at, what's causing these career advancement inequities. And I think to get more Asian women to the top, we've interviewed about 10 to 12 women for our show. And the reason we're doing this is not just to give we started this with the intention of understanding what it is, how these women did it. It's kind of a shout out to Guy Raz and how I built this. I mean, how did these women do it? How did they break the ceiling? And one of the things that we're seeing is that these women, one, they had kind of like a presence that they really didn't, they knew kind of what stereotypes maybe that were out there, but they didn't conform to them. So I think so when you ask the question, what needs to be done? I think first it starts kind of internally with us. And that's really where, I think when we talk about Identity Unveiled, it's unveiling who these women are and recognizing that that they didn't lose sight of who they were as they went through this trajectory. So there's some internal work that I think we as Asian women need to also kind of just see those models, those role models out there. Externally speaking, when you look at kind of what organizations can do, I think it's important to recognize once this whole model minority myth that has really kind of held us back, where like Diane said, they sat on newspapers or slept on newspapers. I used to think that bouncing checks was a good thing because I heard it so often in the household. So I think people understanding kind of that we don't all come from these silver spoons in our mouths, I think is important to break down kind of those stereotypes. The other piece, I think, is resoundingly what we've heard from the women that we've spoken with is they are highly technically competent. And a lot of women, I think, stop there. I think there's a lot of focus on technical competencies. What sets these women who are breaking the ceiling and breaking barriers is that it's really the skills around building relationships, harnessing your presence, that I think we need to spend more time bringing that out. They don't have to hide that. And I think that needs to be brought out. And quite frankly, organizations need to recognize that.
Diane, your reflections on breaking the glass ceiling and breaking your way into C-suites of America for Asian American women. A few thoughts on that, and then I've got one last question for both of you.
Absolutely. There is a steep drop off, as you know. Asian American women, especially, for example, in finance, are extremely well educated, and they have a lot of experience. But then there's a steep drop off in the C-suite, and I'm in the finance world, and I see that firsthand. So it is my passion, personally, my mission, to empower Asian American women to the highest levels of executive leadership positions or C-suite positions in the finance world. And so through how I have been doing that is actually working with groups, for example, as PWIN. I live in New York, and they're also a wonderful group in PWIN with over 800 women. And then there's many other women groups out there that are doing that. But at the helm, we hope to spearhead that in the future for Asian American women in finance. Specifically, how can we catapult them? And then really we want to do it through creating a great, strong Asian Women in Finance network group. But there's also an accelerated program where we bring together our skills where people have trailblazed, have brought power and presence, and like Shveta's background actually in executive coaching would be incredible. So there's a lot of soft skill leadership that we can do and mentoring to really empower these women to the next level.
Final question, a quick one, which is one of you has been called Dothead. Diane, we haven't talked about what you've experienced in the field, but what's been the most confronting thing you've experienced recently in terms of your direct experience of racism towards yourself or towards other Asian American women or other Asian Americans? Quick answer from you first, Diane. I'll conclude by then going to Shveta.
I think there's an inherent level of competition, as a lot of us are second generation, our parents are immigrants. And so I think that is more internal in terms of our trajectory of our career, where we are at. And I hope to turn that into embracing and empowering, inspiring women through our platform, through a shared community.
And what about you, Shveta? Have you copped it directly recently from people in terms of obvious signs and expressions of racism to you as a fully empowered and fully competent Asian American woman? Or are you picking it up from your broader family that things are challenging out there in the streets at the moment?
Well, I think COVID-19, this pandemic really impacted more East Asians. I think when it came to the racial, the hate crimes that have been occurring in the last 10 months or last year since the onset of this pandemic, it reminds me a lot of 9/11. I mean, 9/11 was what Indian Americans and Sikh Americans, like what we faced, because you become what happens. You're that perpetual, the perpetual foreigner, right? The perpetual foreigner syndrome that many of us Asians face. Look, it's kind of like, for me, it's almost, you kind of experience it almost every few weeks or every couple of times in a year. We look, there's always some kind of weird comment, like when you hear, like I was just on a networking call the other day, and this person was like, yeah, this person had a really strong accent, and it was just like I had to slow down my speech in order for these people to understand. When you hear that, like just that these people and you yourself are a minority and you look different, and it was coming from a white male. I think that's
how surprising.
Yeah, it was surprising, and you would think, that the people are more sensitive to it, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done for people to really be self-aware of their own unconscious bias.
Thank you both for your reflections on that, and for the work you're doing with Identity Unveiled. This is really important stuff for the future. And as we draw our conversation to a close, I'd simply like to say your contribution among Asian American women is really important. For those of you who are watching our Asian Americans Building America series, each of these voices is important for the future. Each of the actions that they deliver in the workplace or the workaday lives of Americans is important in moving the dial. My name's Kevin Rudd. I'm president of the Asian Society. Please join into our further editions of this series in the future. We're determined to make a difference. Thank you for watching.